Thank you, everyone, for attending this evening and giving us the ability of your time to review some information related to Rochester Rapid Transit. Let me take a second to introduce myself and kind of the team that's supporting me and you'll be seeing and hearing during this presentation. My name is Jarrett Hubbard. I am a project manager for Rochester Rapid Transit, representing the City Office of Administration. You also might hear from the city, Nick Lemmer from RPT, Communications and Public Information Officer. He'll help me answer a few questions when it comes to public transportation here in town. Primarily, we'll be talking tonight about traffic and the traffic model as it relates to Rochester Rapid Transit. So the main star tonight will be Jonette Kunow from Kimberly Horn Engineering. And I'll turn it over to her here in a few minutes to start walking us through the main topic. But otherwise, also Alicia Valentine and Jim Gersima from SRF Consulting Firms is also available, helping to answer some questions and particularly work some background as the webinar gets going here. Once again, good evening. As far as the agenda, we will do a little bit of background information on Rochester Rapid Transit and how we got to this point. But as I said a second ago, the primary purpose of this evening's conversation is a review of the traffic model and traffic work studies that was done. One, we'll take a quick look at how we got to this point, the traffic that's expected to occur and show up here in 2040, and which was a major driver for Rochester Rapid Transit. And then we'll move into kind of some detailed information about what the model showed us and then how we responded to changes in the model and kind of how the transit system is going to be modified. With that, maybe I'll take 1 second to once again say that the focus of tonight, I know I'm repeating myself here a bunch, is on traffic. We will take some time to look at the background here, and I'll take a pause here in a few minutes to take any questions. And I should also say that we are taking questions in a couple different manners. First, you can always submit your question via the Q&A box. And then we will take a pause during tonight, and then towards the end of the night, if you want to ask your question live, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll recognize you and unmute your mic so that you can ask your question live. I started to say that the focus tonight is on traffic. We will spend we'll get a little bit of time and opportunity to ask some basic questions. But if we have some more information, if you have some more questions, please don't be afraid to visit the website, rochestermn.gov/rapid-transit for more information and to see the recordings of the webinars that we've done over the last few months leading up to this point, and then any of the documents that reference here in a second. And then we'll give you some other ways to reach out to us here in a minute. But with that being said, let's move on in to the project background. Rochester Rapid Transit kind of comes out of and starts with the concept of increasing the amount of transit and frequency and the service levels of transit coming out of the Downtown Development Plan from 2010. But was really started moving ideas started moving forward with the DMC Development Plan in 2015. And then moved through the Transit Development Plan and the city's comprehensive plan in the following years of 2016 and 2017. And then in the last couple of years, work on the project has really picked up on trying to figure out mode and route and things of that nature in the last couple of years. And next slide. So the project, let's take a step back and take a look at what some of those documents, particularly the integrated transit study in 2016, 2017, and then the DMC development plan from 2015 really showed that what would happen to downtown in our community as traffic and more employees started to come into downtown. And so really we have to start with the idea that we're going to expect up to 30,000 new employees by 2040 and up to 4,000 to 5,000 new residents living in downtown. And so what does that mean for, and what does that look like in our downtown, in our community? Well, the first thing is as we'll see later tonight, we're talking streets will be congested with all these additional people trying to drive downtown, particularly in their single occupancy vehicles or their personal vehicles. And so one of the first things that those documents outlined was we need to get people out of their personal vehicles and into other modes. Heavy preference than getting them into public transit, as you can see in the bottom left. But all other modes, we got to get people out of their cars. Additionally, if all those people are driving into downtown, that means a lot of new parking spaces that would be really expensive to try to design and build, and taking up a lot of valuable land downtown for people to just park their cars during the day. And then finally, we can talk about the quality of life in many different aspects of all this growth happening. But specifically, we can talk about additional traffic and parking, that there would be limited parking for residents and patients trying to get downtown and trying to find parking spaces and trying to move around downtown. Okay, Alicia, next. So back in late in 2019, the Rochester City Council went ahead and chose the mode of bus rapid transit, or BRT, for the primary mode to help bring those individuals into downtown. What does bus rapid transit provide us? It provides a superior passenger experience with high frequency and high demand. It improves the capacity, and we're talking about larger buses that would be used with this system that even with COVID restrictions could still carry up to 60 or 75 people per bus. And as you saw a second ago, helps with that switch of getting people out of their cars into other modes. But we have to always remember that transit and the development of Rochester Rapid Transit is just one element of trying to help make sure that we can accommodate that growth and get additional people downtown. Additional things that the way the city of Rochester is viewing it is we also need to look at our parking policies and how we go about that. That would include the development of even more parking lots and parking ride lots similar to the IBM lot further outside of town. Talking about moving people out of into either pedestrian or on bikes, such as it was developing the concept of City Loop. Trying to promote people to get into other modes, and with travel demand management and our TMA, which is known as our Arrive Rochester, which promotes other modes and tries to encourage others to use other than their personal vehicles. And then, of course, obviously, with all these additional people, we would like to, the city's gone through and changed land use and zoning policies to accommodate this additional growth and density downtown, so people don't even have to drive downtown. They already live downtown and can walk to the jobs. Next slide. So coming out of this, what do we get from bus rapid transit, or BRT? We get long-term investment in sustainable transportation. What we mean by this is that one, it's sustainable. We're talking about using electric vehicles, and two, as I mentioned, for over a decade now, the city's been talking about trying to find additional ways to improve the level and types of transit offered. Additionally, the permanence or the ability to show that the route is stable and attractive helps attract additional riders, and also will attract additional economic development along the route. And what I mean by this is development of platforms or stations more similar to what you see behind me or downtown, or more similar even yet with the light rail transit that you see in the Metro Twin Cities. Finally, we're talking about increasing service and capacity, help get those people into downtown. Once they are in downtown, they can move more freely in downtown without having the need to get back to their car and move their car from one parking structure to another. All right, let's move on. All right. Let's talk big picture what the project includes. It is a 2.6 mile bus rapid transit system, or BRT line, we'll take a look at the map here in a second. That includes 7 stations. We're looking at also the use of, and we'll talk more about tonight, what are known as business access and transit lanes. I like to call them transit preferred lanes because business access and transit lanes, or BAT lanes for short, our preference for transit vehicles, but will allow people to make right-hand turns out of them into driveways, accesses, and side streets. So they do act kind of a combo type lane. The project also includes the development of an enclosed climate-controlled St. Mary's Transit Center, which would be across the street from St. Mary's along 2nd Street, and then a development of a pedestrian tunnel underneath 2nd Street. As part of that tunnel, we would reconstruct 2nd Street from 11th to 16th Avenues. And as I mentioned, we're looking at using 60-foot buses that have 3 doors and would be electric vehicles. So just real quickly, the type of service that we're looking at, a bus would be coming to a station or a platform every 5 minutes during the morning and evening rush hours. Then it would come every 10 to 15 minutes during the rest of the day and on the weekends. It would take roughly 15 minutes to get from one end of the line to the other. A low estimate of about roughly 11,000 riders per day, with an expanded service hours than we currently see right now with RPT neighborhood service. Next. Is the map. As you can see now here, it stretches along 2nd Street. Starting on the west side, it would start with what we're calling the West Transit Village. That is the location of Mayo's current west parking lot. And then you would come down and stop at one of the 7 stations, or 6 stations, I guess I should say, after West Transit Village on 2nd Street, all the way to dead ending at the Civic Center, and then making a right-hand turn onto 3rd Avenue, followed by another right-hand turn onto 4th Street near the Government Center, followed by another right-hand turn on the Broadway, and then eventually a left-hand turn back on the 2nd to come back out to the west. So with that, I'll take a pause and see if there's any questions. Once again, you can submit questions via the Q&A box, or you are welcome to go ahead and raise your hand, and we will gladly unmute your mic and allow you to ask your question live. I'll give it a second to see. Right now, I don't see any questions in the Q&A box. So I'll give it another second.
We do have a raised hand from Kelly. Kelly, I'm going to allow you to talk, and then you'll need to unmute and you'll be able to answer your question. Ask your question. I apologize.
Hi, I just had a quick question. You mentioned the transit station is across from St. Mary's. So that would be on the north side of 2nd Street?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're coming from the West Transit Village, you'd have to do the whole loop before you could get dropped off at St. Mary's?
Very good question. Thank you for the question, Kelly, and for making sure that I communicate correctly what will happen. At St. Mary's, at the St. Mary's stop, there will be platforms on either side of the road so that one can travel either westbound or eastbound. What I was referring to earlier is that as part of the project, we're going to buy one of the parcels on the north side of the street across from St. Mary's and develop a new building that would be known as the Transit Center. That center would provide indoor waiting area that would be obviously climate controlled and warm, considering our weather this past week. And so additional place where people can get additional information. And so that's what would be on the north side, is kind of a new transit center, a new enclosed building. But no, there would be a platform on the south side of the street for people to continue traveling east.
Thank you, Jarrett. And then I see we got another question through the Q&A, and that is, what are the milestones for 2021 for the project?
Wow, that is a great question. Right. In fact, that's another piece of information that we don't have in this introduction is that we hope to have the service up and operating in the spring of 2025. But leading up to that, more specifically to your question, in 2021, a few different things are going to be worked on. We're doing a lot of design and work as relates to those platforms and those stations that we talked about. And then we're working on, we're going to be receiving federal funds. So we're working on the environmental phase of the project here in 2021. But most specifically, what we've been communicating to all our policymakers, including the City Council, is here this spring sometime in the next 3 to 4 months, we did submit an application for federal funding. We will not receive that. If we're approved for a project, we won't receive federal funding for probably another year or so yet, but we will know how we scored coming up here in the next few months. And that's important because as long as we score well, it means that we can continue working on the project. And we do expect to score pretty darn well based off of a kind of a sample score that they give you in your application. And then I would say probably the next big milestone is the approval and kind of the conclusion of NEPA, or environmental work that has to be done towards the end of this year, more like early in 2022 would probably be our next couple of deadlines. With that, I'll make sure we get to the topic at hand in traffic and introduce Jonette Kunow of Kimley Horn.
Thanks, Jarrett. So in this part of the presentation, I'm first going to give you kind of the key takeaways, and then dive into the details a bit more, and then come back to those summary points or takeaways. So if you want to go to the next slide. Jared alluded to this already. If growth happens in Rochester and existing patterns continue, those future traffic volumes for those additional 30,000 employees would significantly exceed the capacity of the roadways that go into downtown during the peak period, so particularly during AM and PM peak. So that's one of the factors that is a driver of the project. With or without the project, we do expect that traffic volume on 2nd Street will continue to grow as there's more activity, and that will make it more difficult to turn from residential streets onto 2nd Street just because there is more volume on that street. To accommodate that future growth and allow downtown to continue to be a vibrant downtown that isn't full of cars, the commuter mode shift, and particularly commuters, because we're most concerned about that AM and PM peak periods, that shifting people onto transit. And that doesn't mean that you take transit from your front door of your house to the front door of your work, but it does mean shifting people to parking outside of downtown and taking transit into downtown. So the rapid transit line is one element of that. It's part of a much larger transit plan that Rochester has that will continue to be developed over the next 20 years. Jarrett mentioned business access transit lanes, BAT lanes. Through the traffic analysis, what the modeling showed was that BAT lanes can be provided on most of 2nd Street without significant traffic impacts. So what that means is that the outside, or the lanes next to the curb, would be the lanes that have a preference for transit, but they continue to allow those right turns onto those cross streets, driveways, those types of things. And that is a feasible design that benefits transit and doesn't significantly impact traffic. And so you see in number 4 there, it says most of 2nd Street. What the analysis showed was that in the Highway 52 area, specifically Highway 52 to 14th Avenue, the traffic volumes in that area are so high that it was not feasible to have BAT lanes included through that area. We did the analysis and concluded that those needed to be 2 general purpose traffic lanes in each direction, and that making that change had a significant benefit to traffic and had only a minor effect on BRT. So that's what you'll see in the proposed design as we get a little bit further in the presentation. Next slide. Another outcome of the traffic modeling is that it helps us to identify key locations where left turns are needed, where left turn lanes are needed. So to keep traffic flowing smoothly, several of those have been added through the project. With the conversion of the outside lanes on 2nd Street to those BAT lanes, we do expect to see small amounts of traffic that will shift from 2nd Street to other routes. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by small amounts of traffic in the presentation tonight. And then we saw an even smaller shift to some parallel nearby streets. But again, the magnitude was very small. With the rapid transit project, that is, again, we talked about it's one component of the overall strategies to accommodate the growth. And whether or not the rapid transit project is built, there are other improvements that will still be needed, for example, on Civic Center Drive and on 6th Street. On 6th Street, it's particularly near 14th Avenue. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and what we saw through the traffic analysis. And again, BRT is just one element of, it's one piece of the puzzle and one solution to accommodate growth. To give a little background about traffic work that led to the current phase of the project, as part of the integrated transit studies, there was some analysis done that really demonstrated the need to move commuters, so during those peak periods, to move to transit. So on the next slide, this is a graphic. If you see the boxes that have sort of the red peak and then the blue kind of rectangle below, what this graphic is looking at is if you did, from Jarrett's slide, if you built the 7 city blocks of parking that had the 16,500 spaces, even if you built all that parking, big and expensive parking in downtown, the transportation system couldn't actually deliver those people to those parking facilities during those commuter peaks. And so the piece of the rectangle that's red, that's how much over capacity that entry into downtown is. So the one that you see kind of in the top left, that's at Civic Center. The middle one with the red is at 2nd Street. And then the one right below it is at 6th Street. So when you look at that, for example, 2nd Street, that would suggest that there would be almost twice as many people trying to exit 52 onto 2nd Street in the morning as there would actually be capacity for those people to do that. So it's just one more aspect of demonstrating if the rapid transit project and some of these other transit solutions aren't implemented, this is what things would, this is what the conditions would be. And the next slide is similar. This is without the additional parking in downtown. But again, what this is showing is that those streets coming into downtown, so Civic Center, 2nd Street, 6th Street, they are full of cars. There isn't any more capacity available for more traffic to move into downtown from that regional highway network. We have a similar, looks very similar. This is the afternoon. So this is showing the movement out of downtown in the afternoon. And again, Civic Center, 2nd Street, 6th Street, totally full. No room for any additional capacity on those routes. And again, this is without the rapid transit project. And I think there's one more graphic, and this is just showing kind of in colors, when we talk about those streets being full, this just gives you kind of different visual just showing the red and some of the orange is showing those are the segments that are full. So just to give you some perspective on what we mean when we say that street is full of cars. So as we move into the current phase, so the information I was just sharing was from the integrated transit studies in 2017, 2018. With this current traffic analysis, the purpose was to understand the effects of the proposed rapid transit project on the transportation system. And that does two things. It informs the project design. It results in modifications and refinements to the design to make traffic flow better with the project. And then identifying and documenting any traffic impacts and deciding if there are any improvements that need to be made to mitigate those impacts. That is part of the environmental process that the project goes through. So on this slide, the blue circles that you see, those are the intersections that were part of the traffic modeling. So you can see it's not only 2nd Street, which is kind of running through the lower third of the graphic, but it also includes West Circle Drive and Highway 14 kind of up in the upper left. It includes a number of intersections on Civic Center Drive in the middle there. It does include some intersections on 6th Street, especially at Highway 52. And then it has some additional intersections through the downtown grid that are adjacent to 2nd Street. In the process for the traffic modeling, we first start with existing conditions. And that means existing traffic volumes. And in this case, all of those were counted pre-COVID. And so they were typical traffic conditions in pre-2020. It's the existing roadway configuration, so the lanes and the traffic signals and the traffic signal timing that exists today. And we use that to calibrate the model to those existing conditions so that as we then use that same model to look at future conditions, it gives us confidence that it's able to replicate real life. So the next step that we do is to look at projected 2045 traffic volumes, and those are based on the forecast households, population, and employment. And those forecast households, population, and employment come from ROCOG, the MPO, and are consistent with their planning efforts for 2045 for that projected growth, as well as the improvements that are in the 2045 long-range transportation plan. So what we call the no build in traffic engineering, we call it the no build. It means what would the future look like without the project, but the growth would still happen as projected in 2045. Then for the build conditions, what we call the build conditions, but it's really what do things look like with the project. Same assumptions about level of growth and the transportation improvements as were included in the scenario without the project. And so this time in this scenario, we're layering on the addition of the rapid transit project. And so by comparing those two scenarios, the no build without the project, and then the build with the project, we're able to identify what is the change as a result of the project. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, the future traffic volumes are based on that forecast growth, which is developed by the Rochester Olmsted Council of Governments. They have a travel demand model that uses those inputs. The households, population, and employment are inputs, and then the traffic volumes are an output of that travel demand model. So what we're doing through this analysis is consistent with the larger planning for the region and what's included in the long-range transportation plan. For the traffic analysis itself, we focus on the morning and the afternoon peak periods, and we do that because those time periods have the highest traffic volumes. So that allows us to identify the most significant impacts of the proposed project. So we look at the busiest times for traffic. The analysis uses a modeling software called VSIM, and we use that software because it's very detailed and has the ability to model not only vehicles, but trucks, buses, pedestrians, and bicycles. So it gives us the best opportunity to model what real world conditions will look like. And then as we run the scenarios, the model outputs tell us average delay for movements and intersections, which is what, for traffic analysis, how we assess the operations is that delay measure. And then it also tells us about congestion and queuing and how that factors into the operations. And the metric that we talk about on the previous slide, I mentioned delay at intersections, and delay is categorized what we call level of service, which describes the quality of the experience, which is related to that delay. And it's kind of like grades in school. A is the best and F is the worst. And we think about A and B as being very good, really uncongested. C and D are acceptable. They're starting to be busier, but C and D is an acceptable operation for this type of area and analysis. And then E and F indicates that there's a lot of congestion and the system really isn't operating very well. So next we will go into the no-build conditions or the forecast, what things would look like without the project. One element that is part of the no-build conditions is there is a 2,500 space parking ramp planned to be built by Mayo Clinic at the West Transit Village. And this is part of the no build because this is a parking ramp and a development that Mayo has committed to build, even if the rapid transit project doesn't happen. And so that's what we are reflecting. The early analysis of this alternative did show that for people to get in and out of the development and get in and out of that parking facility, there do need to be 2 additional traffic signals on 2nd Street at the West Transit Village. Another improvement that's included in the no build conditions is the expansion of Civic Center Drive from 4 lanes to 6 lanes. And that's included here because it is part of the long range transportation plan. The expectation is that that will be needed sometime between now and 2045. And so it is included in the 2045 conditions. The timing of that and how that would happen is still to be determined. And then the last bullet there, just to reiterate, this scenario does not include the Rochester Rapid Transit project. And so we're gonna go through a couple of these graphics and just to kind of explain what you're looking at. Although the traffic modeling included 60 some intersections, we're mostly gonna focus on 2nd Street here as part of this presentation. The circles that you see, the left side of the circle is representing what the operations look like in the morning peak in 2045, and then the right half of the circle is the afternoon at that same intersection. And so you can see here from West Circle Drive, which is on the left of the graphic, to Highway 52, which is on the right, things generally look okay to good. So the green is good and the yellow is acceptable. And so operations in this segment look okay. As we go to the next segment at Highway 52, you'll see this is where we really start to see some congestion. So consistent with the previous work, you know, we're seeing yellow and red at the interchange in the morning, where you see the red on the left half of the circle. That's really saying people coming off of 52 to come onto 2nd Street, that is really congested and really full. And then in the afternoon, as you see the red on the right side of the circle at 52, at 16th, at 11th, and back at 6th, that's saying that that whole segment is really pretty congested all the way coming out of downtown back out to Highway 52. So the red is indicating we don't have good operations through this segment. And then the last segment is more the segment in downtown. And as we get downtown, the traffic volumes are a little bit lower because they're more distributed into the street grid onto a number of different streets. So you do see the red there in the afternoon at 4th Avenue, which is the circle on the left. And then through the rest of downtown, the operations are green or yellow, so we would consider those to be acceptable. One thing while we're talking to, oh, sorry, Alicia, if you could just go back for a second. One thing, excuse me, while we're talking about this scenario, I mentioned in the summary, there are some improvements that will be needed, and Civic Center Drive is certainly one of them. One of the others is there is at the intersection at 6th Street and 14th Avenue, that's a location that has stop signs on all the approaches today. And we do expect to see traffic on 6th Street increase. And so 6th Street and 14th Avenue is another location that, again, sometime between now and 2045, that intersection is going to be at capacity and potentially need some improvements. And so that would be an improvement project that would need to be pursued separately from this rapid transit project. So next, we'll talk a little bit about the build conditions, or those 2045 conditions with the rapid transit project. And as Jarrett showed earlier, the route runs from the West Transit Village on the west end of 2nd Street through downtown on 2nd Street, and then does a loop by Civic Center area, the Government Center, and on Broadway. On this map, the yellow segments are where the bus rapid transit would operate in lanes with mixed traffic. So there is not a preferred transit lane or a BAT lane in those yellow segments. And then the blue would have the outside lanes on 2nd Street that are the BAT lanes, or the business access and transit. The analysis does assume that signal priority is provided on 2nd Street. And what that means is that the signal timing has the ability to make slight adjustments to help those buses move through the corridor. You know, so rather than just missing the end of the green and then sitting there until the signal cycles around, it's giving them that little bit of a bonus green time to get through the intersection. And so in this scenario with the transit, the BAT lanes on portions of 2nd Street, the forecasting did show that small volumes of traffic would shift from 2nd Street to Civic Center Drive, 6th Street, and other parallel streets. And when I say small volume, even during the heaviest traffic times, the busiest traffic times, that shift was less than 2 vehicles per minute total. So that actually would be a volume that would be hard to observe, to notice the difference. And on the residential streets, it would be less than 1 vehicle per minute. So overall, that number is very small, but it would, the forecast model does suggest that there would be some traffic that would look for other routes besides 2nd Street. Again, not a lot. So then we're going to walk through these similar looking graphics. So again, starting on the west side at West Circle Drive, you're seeing these intersections are green and yellow. They were also green and yellow in the no build conditions. And so when we're comparing the two scenarios, we're not just looking at whether the color changed. We're most specifically looking at, did the project cause an intersection from being from operating acceptably to unacceptable? So did it go from green or yellow to red? Because we would consider that to be an impact that would need to be mitigated, or there would need to be improvement. So in this segment, the intersections were green or yellow, and they're still showing green or yellow. And these operations are for vehicle traffic. That's what this is representing. And it does include the BAT lanes that start at 23rd Avenue and then extend to Highway 52. On the next slide, you can see, okay, so earlier in the process, we had originally analyzed the Highway 52 area with BAT lanes all the way through the entire project. And what we saw was that, honestly, it didn't work. Traffic was extremely congested, worse than in the no build. And we saw backups that extended on large sections of 2nd Street, on the ramps from 52. And that wasn't an acceptable operation. It doesn't work well. So as a result, this segment from 14th Avenue to Highway 52, where the volumes are really the highest, this section has the BRT or the buses operating in 2 general purpose lanes in each direction. And then the BAT lanes pick up again east of 14th Avenue, and then you can see where they're starting again west of the interchange. This had a significant improvement for traffic operations and had only a minor effect on the BRT. So this was a change a design modification that the project made that made traffic work better. The other thing I'll highlight on this slide is an earlier version of the design. We analyzed and identified we really need a westbound left turn lane at 14th Avenue. There's a steady amount of traffic that wants to turn there, but the bigger, the more important piece was that we need to keep that westbound through traffic flowing. That's where traffic volumes are really starting to pick up, exiting downtown. And so that left turn lane was needed just to allow that through traffic to keep moving. And so that was implemented. There was also a left turn lane that was implemented at 11th Avenue for a similar reason, to keep traffic flowing. So with those refinements that are shown on that slide, this is the operations with the project from, again, from the Highway 52 area over to 6th Avenue. And in the no build conditions, we saw some red and through at a number of these intersections. With the project, the transit's able to move a similar, actually more people with less congestion because of those people being in buses as opposed to single occupant vehicles. So you're seeing green and yellow at these intersections, which would indicate that with those changes and adjustments that were made, this now has acceptable operations through this segment of the corridor. And then through downtown, on the no build conditions, we showed most of these are green and yellow, and they continue to be with the project. including on 4th Street and the segment of mixed traffic on Broadway. We see operations that are acceptable through this segment as well with the bat lanes. So just to, I know that was a lot of slides and a lot of information, but just to summarize the key points, if we don't do anything, future traffic volumes will exceed the ability of the transportation network to handle those volumes, and particularly during those commuter AM and PM peak periods. With those increases in traffic, it will be more difficult to turn from some of those residential streets onto 2nd Street because it will be busier. And commuter mode shift from single occupant vehicles to transit are needed to accommodate that growth because the transportation system won't work if the majority of people continue to drive into downtown. The analysis, the more recent analysis that was done for this project showed that bat lanes can be provided on most of 2nd Street and don't have significant traffic impacts. Where we saw that the bat lanes would have significant impacts, which was the Highway 52 to 14th Avenue, that's where now we're showing that the BRT would be in general purpose traffic lanes. And again, that was a significant improvement for traffic and did not significantly impact the BRT efficiency. So that was a good trade-off. Left turn lanes have been incorporated into the project at key locations based on the analysis. So 2 of those locations were at 14th Avenue and 11th Avenue on 2nd Street. The modeling suggests there will be small amounts of traffic that shift from 2nd Street to other streets. Based on the magnitude of those shifts, we don't expect those to be significant on either some of the larger streets or on the residential streets. There will be improvements that will still be needed on other streets, such as Civic Center Drive and 6th Street. Those aren't caused by the rapid transit project. They're things that'll continue or need to be planned over the next between now and 2045. And BRT is just one element in a set of solutions, and the rapid transit project is one element of a much larger transit system that will help people move into downtown for those jobs in downtown Rochester.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'll give you time to breathe and maybe take a sip of water there. This would be another opportunity we're looking for questions. Once again, you can always raise your hand and ask your question live, and we can go ahead and unmute your mic so we could do that. Or you can, once again, always submit your questions via the Q&A box. Currently, we don't have any questions in the box. Several of you have asked a few questions, and we tried to be responsible and respond directly to you on a few of those questions. Maybe if I can, it looks like Barry has raised his hand. So Alicia, if you could help Barry.
Hi. Yeah, I was having a problem with the muting and the videos. There was no buttons on my screen about how to turn them on or off. Anyway, I'll ask 2 questions now, and I know I'm going to be talking to some other people involved with this tomorrow. I've heard that in Duluth and in Minneapolis, they've had problems with the electric buses, especially when the weather gets to be 10 degrees or 0, where they've actually had to remove them or stop them. And I'm just wondering what your view is on and how well they're maintained in the kind of cold weather we have here. Another question has to do with the effect on pedestrians, because you talk a lot about traffic, but you really don't talk much about pedestrians. What would be the impact on pedestrians of this when the street is being reconstructed, and also Also after the street is constructed. And I'll save my other questions for tomorrow. Anyway.
Thank you. I'll give Joan a second to think about how she wants to respond about how pedestrians were included within the model. But I'll first, Nick and I will probably tag team the question a little bit on electric bus question. I know at RPT, and Nick has been involved in those conversations, so maybe I'll put a pin on that piece, that RPT has been in conversations with both Duluth and Minneapolis concerning some of their issues with electric buses. And I know that we have already made a few changes specifically to respond to those. The most direct one being on the extreme cold that you talked about. The extreme cold has shown that there is a significant impact to the battery and the life of the battery of those vehicles because of our extreme cold. As such, to make sure that we continue to maintain, we have power for the entire time the bus is on the route. We are planning to do what's known as on-route chargers, or place chargers along the route, so that when the bus does stop for even as little as 5 minutes before it starts its next route, it can load up and charge on up and try to maintain a decent level of charge all the time. Nick, is there anything else that you want to maybe mention in your conversations with Minneapolis and Duluth?
Well, specific to those conversations, I can only say that they've been going on for some time. They're stretching back well over a year. We also had each of the American-based bus manufacturers come in and give us a presentation on what they had in terms of electric fleet, the technologies, how they were improving. I'll just add one thing in addition to that comment about talking to other systems. We were awarded 2 federal low emission, no emission grants. Each of those 2 grants were written to procure 2 transit vehicles. These are 60-foot electric transit vehicles, will be very similar to what we anticipate to put into service for the rapid transit. So we'll have an opportunity to thoroughly test those vehicles out in really just the next couple of years, well ahead of the anticipated first day launch of rapid transit. So, but it's new technology, for all of those who are rushing.
Nick, you went on mute somehow.
I think I hit my space bar. Sorry about that. I'll just say for those who are rushing headlong into electrifying the fleet, I don't think we have that luxury here in north of the Mason-Dixon line, if you will, where we got to dip our toe in the water. We got to move cautiously because so far we're finding our peer agencies aren't able to move quite that fast for just the reasons you mentioned, Barry. So a good question.
On the pedestrian question, and I think there was maybe 2 parts to that. I'll respond to the what are the impacts to pedestrians after the project is completed. So part of the analysis or the traffic modeling does actually include the pedestrians as part of the analysis. And so we did look at several key intersections along 2nd Street. We looked at with the changes in the street and with the transit and vehicle volumes, how does that change pedestrian delay, or what is the pedestrian experience? And what we saw that was that the delays for pedestrians trying to cross 2nd Street were very similar before and after the project. The biggest driver of the pedestrian delay and the pedestrian experience has more to do with actually the signal timing. So how long is it from, how long is the traffic signal cycle? So essentially, how long are you gonna wait if you push the button when is that walk going to come up? That was much more influential on the pedestrian delay or experience as opposed to the, you know, specifically the bat lane and the transit.
And maybe in the response to pedestrian and particularly any question related to construction, we're probably the best way I can describe it is we're at a level of design right now known as 15%, which kind of shows us that some of the concepts and designs that we're looking at will or will not work, but we're still not at a level yet of really trying to make sure everything is down to the 1/10 of an inch and making sure it fits and works. So we still got some time and review to do, some work to do, a lot of work to do, let me rephrase that, before we can actually say with certainty on a few things. And one of those things is construction. We're going to need some more time to take a look about what we're planning and where we're planning it, and before we can really start talking about phasing and making adjustments for construction. And that includes accommodating pedestrians during the construction process. We're still some time away from that. Well, I'm taking the pause to see if there's any last questions that come on in. If not, I'll probably start my goodbye speech. And Alicia, if you can move to the next slide. We have kind of committed to doing these webinars every month, and right now we are scheduled, but unfortunately it's not on the website to register yet, but we are scheduled to do our next webinar Tuesday, March 30th, once again at 12 and 5 o'clock, so twice during the day again. That webinar will focus in on kind of a general project update on some of the work that we've had up to now. So we probably will have a brief review of kind of this traffic work. I can tell you we've been working pretty extensively on a few issues related to amenities and features and that user experience, and then even some early level designs on the platforms and the stations themselves, which will actually be more of a focus in the April session when some of those designs have a little more time to be flushed out. Additionally, you can always go to the website rochestermm.gov/rapid transit to see previous webinars, recordings, including this one. Hopefully we get this one posted within about a week. And then any additional information, you can also on that website, we have what's known as a wiki map, which is probably you'll find that on the engagement tab, which is a map that allow you to submit questions and concerns related to the project on Long 2nd Street and downtown. As far as reaching out to us, you can always, once again, visit our website, rochestermm.gov/rapid transit for more information, or you can send an email. We have a project email box, and that is rapidtransit@rochestermm.gov. That's rapidtransit@rochestermn.gov, and a phone number of 507-328-2025, 507-328-2025. With that being said, no more questions have come on in, and no one else has raised their hand. So once again, I'll thank the panel and particularly Jonette for walking us through the traffic element tonight. And thank you all for attending this evening. I really appreciate several of you who show up every month and attend every single one of these and really get to know this project in detail and know kind of day to day almost what I'm working on. So I really appreciate you all attending these sessions, and have a good night and see you next month.